To a new Garn Report midweek edition here Wednesday. We got a mini series, so love the chance to talk about these games, these teams between back-to-back matchups. And the Celtics took the first of two here against the Cavs. Another good competitive game after a bunch of them last season as well to begin this Donovan Mitchell era in Cleveland. But Cavs just floating around 500, injuries, inconsistency to begin this year. They lose the front end of a back-to-back against the Magic coming into this as well in a pretty poor showing. And they're up against it again without Evan Mobley heading into Thursday. Justin Rowan's here, as he always is, to talk Cavs and Celtics. Justin, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'll take a little bit of exception to poor showing in Orlando. I thought that was a hard fought game from them. Obviously, playing
I
without Evan
guess
Mobley.
it's getting difficult, and I'm a big Magic guy, but it's getting difficult to adjust to the fact that the Magic, the Pacers, out west, the Rockets and Thunder, these are arguably part of the elite teams in the league right now. Now, will it last? That's what we're gonna see. But you're used to going up against those teams and being like, "Yeah, you're gonna win this."
Yeah, well, I mean, especially at home. Orlando is a really good team. I believe they're 11-2 at home. They beat Milwaukee. They've obviously blew out you guys at home.
Yep.
So for the Cavs to kind of hang around in a game without Evan Mobley, like Mobley is just so important to what the Cavs do defensively, especially against a team like Orlando that has Franz, that has Paolo, that really put pressure on the rim. And with Jared Allen basically being out of that entire game as well with foul trouble. I thought it was good for the Cavs to hang around, but I really enjoyed the game last night. Obviously, it didn't go the way that the Cavs would have hoped after that hot start. But it became competitive pretty quickly in that one. Boston taking a lead in the second quarter, and it remained competitive until the Cavs just kind of ran out of gas in the fourth. I thought it was a really, really fun game, and like you alluded to earlier, it just is another addition in kind of this stretch over the last two seasons here, where Cleveland and Boston just seem to play really great games every time they match up with each other.
Yeah, and you had a lot of stretches in this game that were memorable. Brown to begin it, keeping the Celtics in it. The hot Cavs start, as you said, they're going up 25-10. I thought the Celtics were in rough shape then. I had a hard time imagining them coming back and winning this game after just playing the first 10 minutes out of rhythm, out of sync offensively. They were getting
Yeah.
decent shots, but you're just that cold. You're down by that much against a team that has its two stars rolling, as Cleveland did for most of that game. I thought they were up against it, but credit to Boston. It's a different Celtics team this year to not only get back as quickly as they did, within one by halftime, but then to close this game out in crunch time. And they're now 8-4 in clutch finishes. It was probably their biggest issue as a team the last couple of years here, especially in big spots. And they've made it look almost easy.
Mm.
These, first 12 games that they've been in those situations. They've had a few hiccups. The Hornets won the biggest example where Brown really struggled in that situation late. But other than that, they've mostly succeeded, especially with Kristaps Porzingis in the lineup. And what do you see in crunch time here? They go to him 3 straight times in screening situations, gets fouled in all of them, and hits 6 free throws as part of a 9-for-9 night for him. And
Mhm.
he's been all the difference in the world for this team. I guess we can start with the Celtics, Justin. I'm stunned because I always liked his game. I thought he could help. I didn't love giving up Smart, but then once they got Holiday, it made a lot more sense to
Yeah.
me. So I was gonna live with it, but I worried about the injuries, and he's missed 4 games, but not a ton of bumps and bruises so far. He's been phenomenal defensively, and the offense. He's so flexible. He's the best post up player in the league. Which, if we said that 3 years ago, our minds would be blown with given what he was in Dallas.
Yeah, he's been terrific for Boston. I thought big part of why the Cavs were able to do relatively well yesterday. Like when the Cavs got out to that hot start, like in our Discord, we always had the game thread going, and most of the comments were like, "Well, this is kind of what we thought might happen." Where Boston, after just such a long layoff, might come out a little bit rusty. Some of the shot selection wasn't great from them, and some just ill-advised turnovers and whatnot. But I really thought that once Boston settled into the game, uh, they did a good job, getting the offense back on track. I thought Jared Allen did a really good job on Porzingis, but like you said, by the end of the night, he kind of had his own way and made the plays when they mattered. I think his defense has been stellar throughout the season, and I think, when you look at the moves that Boston made, I didn't love the Porzingis deal at first, but like you mentioned, once you add Drew Holiday to the mix, I just think you're not really giving up anything defensively going from Smart to Holiday, and Holiday's just such a better organizer of the offense in comparison to Smart. Like all those factors just contribute to me believing that Boston's the best team in the East and the clear favorite to make the finals.
Yeah, and you see the impact too in how much trouble he gives the opposing bigs. And you mentioned it first half, he only scores 2 points. Allen did a pretty good job with them overall, bad
Yeah.
turnovers. So it was probably the worst half he's played with the team so far. But then after halftime, they're just hitting him in those pick and pops. He's draining them. He hit that step back one over Allen, which was nasty. That's a big part of his arsenal too. And then he goes to the post late. So he has a lot of different spots on the floor he can score from. And he's someone that Brown and Tatum both individually can play with, because we've had this conversation for a while. They don't play well together. And that's
Hmm.
not to say they can't lead the team together, or they can't win a championship together, or you need to break them up. But they just don't play off each other well. They don't pass to each other a ton. They don't set screens for each other. They play the same position, so it's the same kind of guys guarding them. They're finally both able to interact with another player on the team in the pick and roll, in just different actions, two-man game in Brown's case, where they're able to make opponents pick their poison. And they really haven't had that, especially at the center position. Like Rob had his great attributes on the offensive end, like rebounding and dunking, but he didn't have a super versatile game on that end. And then Horford, effectively the last 2-3 years here, has just been a three-point shooter, spacer. So the dynamic impact he brings at center, where so many perimeter players are able to play off him, has been just awesome to watch. And I wasn't sure how well he'd adjust to being like the third or fourth option. Like, I thought that would be a real question with this team, how everybody would sacrifice. But getting to know him a little bit, getting to talk to him, like, he's just laid back, smiling, thrilled to be on a winning team, has no problem at all if he takes like 8-9 shots in a game. I mean, he's just so happy, and, like, he's talked a lot this year about how he's matured and how, like, he regrets some of the early experiences in his career. But he's definitely a different player, different guy than what we saw from him early in his career, when he had a lot of promise, a lot of physical potential, and now, like, it's more skill and I guess just sort of mentality that's driving him now at this point in this stage of his career.
Yeah, it goes to show that NBA players and people in the NBA in general aren't poorly written TV characters, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
sometimes we just kind of reduce all of these guys into caricatures, and that was a big concern of mine. I was like, man, Porzingis didn't like not the guy in Dallas playing off Luka, someone that you would think it would set him up well and he would kind of thrive in that kind of a situation. But people learn from their experiences, and when you listen to the interviews with him, obviously JJ just did one recently with him. It just sounds like such a more mature player, and I think Boston's roster makes a lot more sense. Like the guys that they have coming in off the bench have been contributing really well for them. The fact that you have two guards where you can kind of stagger, like Drew and White, both are able to provide playmaking and set guys up. And then, as you mentioned, Jaylen and Jayson's ability to play off of Porzingis, I think all of it just leads to them being a much more complete team, a team that makes a lot more sense. And man, like that's a hell of a roster to play against. Like obviously, playing against Boston's offense without Mobley does make things a little bit tougher, but their defense is really stout. Like you're going to have to pick your poison, and you have such great point of attack defenders, like probably the best point of attack defensive backcourt in the league, with Holiday and White. And Porzingis does such a great job in that drop coverage. I thought the Cavs were able to, effectively get some of those pull up looks, but I'd be interested to see. It's disappointing that Mobley's not playing for either of these games, because I really would have been interested to see kind of how they use him to kind of counteract what Boston's doing defensively, and then of course what he would do to Boston's offense on the other end.
Yeah, the third quarter was great, 35-32. It was tit for tat. Mitchell got going. He ends up going 4 for 7 in that quarter. Garland just started killing the drop, and
Yeah.
that's where the Celtics had to adjust late and actually have Porzingis guard the perimeter, which was interesting to see. He doesn't do a ton of that, but he's shown he's capable in certain spots here. And on the other side, Derrick White, was this the third? No, that must have been the second. He comes out and hits 3 straight threes and just
Yeah.
continues to be perfect. You mentioned the backcourts here.
I'm so annoyed by that. You know, he was never able to shoot until he left to Boston, and now all of a sudden he's a knockdown shooter. Go
The
figure, right?
the guy is perfect. So the first year he wasn't on that finals run, he really
Yeah,
struggled
I remember.
offensively, especially into the finals. He had the great game 1 and then disappeared after that. Last year, a lot of times in crunch time, and we'll get to Joe in a minute here, but I think the biggest mistake he made last year was just automatically putting White on the bench in crunch time in favor of
Mm,
Brogdon and Smart. And
I
now you
agreed with
see
that.
this
Yeah.
year with Smart gone, Brogdon gone too, he's an automatic in that spot, and he's an automatic to start and play the 35, 40 minutes. I'm thrilled that they didn't bench him this year too when they were having that debate over the starting lineup, because you could argue he is the second best player on this team. And as much as I like Jaylen,
Ooh, that
I
is
won't
spicy.
I won't go against that argument because he does everything. He blocks shots. He defends the perimeter. He has a 10, 11 assist game already this year, so he can move the ball well. He only turns it over about 1, 2 times a game, and he has the ball quite a bit. And then you mentioned the spot up shooting. I mean, he is stepping into shots off the dribble this year into the half court, and the confidence with him is just off the charts. I mean, he's already very quickly, and I've watched probably what 3, 4 hours of Celtics basketball now between the original big three with KG and Pierce and all of them, and Isaiah and the first like young Tatum Brown era, and now this new one. I think he's firmly in my top 5 of favorite Celtics. I mean, he's got this all-time moment. Unfortunately, they go on to lose the game 7.
Oh my god,
But the
yeah.
game 6 where he puts it back in at the buzzer, and you just wish that he could have that and have it be more consequential in Celtics history, but still, I'm always gonna remember that one. So the guy's just incredible. They got him on a great deal. What was it? Josh Richardson, Romeo Langford, and a couple firsts.
Yeah.
They were a little aggressive with the first at the time, which was, a controversial thing, but he's changed this team along with some other guys. Holiday's been great since he's come over. Porzingis we mentioned, but I feel like the story of this team this year is that Derrick White, as they start to, figure out what they're going to do with a bunch of different players here into the future, he's a free agent in 2 years. I know Brown just signed this big extension and all of that, but I think the guy you have to have into the future is Derrick White. I don't think this thing's going to work without him.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like he was the guy that at that trade deadline where Boston got him, he was coveted. The Cavs went after him as
I
well.
remember, yeah.
Yeah, and like would have been a great guy that would make a lot of sense next to Darius Garland at that time, prior to the Donovan Mitchell trade. And Cavs have a undrafted rookie that I love to compare to Derek White in Craig Porter Jr. just because he's just so similar in terms of like when they came into the NBA, his ability, like the fact that he was leading his college team as a 6'1", 6'2" guard in blocks, rebounds, steals, points, all that. Like just so similar in terms of feel for the game. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Derek White. I get where you're coming from there. I still really like Jaylen Brown, so I'm going to take up for him a little bit, but the fact that you can make that kind of impact argument, I think like it's grounded in logic. Like I completely see where you're coming from. And when you look at specifically what the Celtics needed to take themselves to the next level, having a guy like Derek White that is able to be that glue guy, that's able to fill in so many different areas, that's able to provide secondary playmaking and make everybody else better. That's what they really needed because they had these individual guys that are phenomenal, all NBA level talents when you look at those wings. And we talked about it in the past, especially, that first half of the year under Ime, where they just didn't feel like more than the sum of their parts. And I really feel like Derek White is one of those players that helps elevate you as a team and make you better as a collective than you are individually. And when you have the best, starting lineup in the NBA, if you can make that lineup better than the sum of its parts, that gives you a championship recipe.
Yeah, you need the connectors, you need the glue guys. And now that
And
they
you need the
have
volume guys. Like, you need the guys that can go out and do what Jaylen Brown does, because as much as, people look at, like, per 100 possession impact and all this kind of stuff, and, oh, well, the efficiency at 14 points per game, you do need those guys that can go out and efficiently score 25, 30 points per game, that can explode and have those runs that carry you and keep you connected when a team like Cleveland goes on a run. So all of it matters. And that's the beauty of basketball. It's so subjective. But I just think that Derrick White absolutely is one of those guys that really elevates you as a team.
yeah, and Brown's in an interesting spot now. He signs a $300 million deal. I thought he had a pretty strong support from this fan base to start his career, really through that game 7 last year, and that changed a lot. I mean, it's amazing what one big game and a big spot can do to a guy's reputation, because he turns it over 8 times in that game, an all-out meltdown, and you understand it, right? You go into that game, you go through the whole postseason with Tatum being the guy at the point of attack, and on the first play, Tatum goes down, and you have to shift, and Brown has to take that responsibility against a really tough defense, and it was a disaster. And he talked about that a little bit going into this game as a motivation piece. ESPN put a graphic out there of, back-to-back games, 0 assists last week. You got all the left-hand jokes, which were probably the most overused joke of any on NBA Twitter over the
Still
offseason.
cracks me up every time when they posted that video at practice where he's dribbling with the right. Oh my god, that was just way too funny.
And then on top of that, he signs the biggest deal in NBA history, and that's what gets thrown around all summer. It's highest paid player ever, and everyone's like, Jaylen Brown? So you had all that working against him going into this year, and the fact that they bring in 2 other stars to play alongside him who are probably going to have the ball as much, if not more, on some nights than him. So overall, you see a game like last night, and you look at his production overall to start this year, and I feel like he's done a pretty good job with this difficult situation he's in here. But there's always going to be a lot of scrutiny on him. I think fairly in the case of the ball handling, which just has to get better. It does. I know every player has a weakness, but it's a big one in his case. And the defense, which I feel like can be so much better for him at certain spots, but kind of just varies night to night in a way that it
Yeah,
shouldn't with him. But
especially off ball.
on the whole, you mentioned it, like the efficiency, the volume at which he can score, and against this Cavs team in particular, and I really thought he was the guy last night, who, of course, with the start, kept them in the game. When you go up against an Allen or even an Evan Mobley, or just this like rock solid front line of rim protectors and size, you need a guy that can just break it open when you're not shooting well, when the offense isn't putting the ball in the net, or you're missing all your threes, as this team sometimes does. You need a guy who's just willing to stick his head down, drive, finish through contact, and he did that over and over again this game. And it's really his most impressive skill to me, is just the strength with which he finishes inside. There's a lot of baffling parts about his game, but there's something to having a scorer who can just put it in the net, and that's what he focuses on, and that's what you're going to get from him night in and night out. So that is where I appreciate him, and I get both sides of the argument for and against him, especially at $50 million a year. But they need him, I think. I think they do, and it's going to be interesting if they don't win this year, what they're going to do at that spot. But I do think he's more valuable than the detractors say here.
Yeah, I just feel like conversation around teams has just become so much more negative, and I don't know if it has to do with like the rise and prominence of sports gambling or what it is, but I just feel like conversation gets too toxic too quickly, and especially when it comes to team building, like what Boston's managed to have here with these two and keeping them together for so long, like that's unique, but that's also what it used to be, right? Like it used to be a journey where you go through the ups and downs, you learn from your setbacks and your playoff losses, and you add to your game. And I just feel like Jaylen Brown, like the most important thing, and you touched on it, is his ability to apply rim pressure. Like as a driver and as a slasher, you need to have that from the wing position, and I just don't feel like Tatum consistently does that at the same level, and, the guards aren't necessarily going to do that. Kristaps obviously can do that and get to the rim, but having that from the wing position is just so important. And it's one of the things, like when I look at the Cavs, obviously they went out and they addressed a lot of their needs in this past offseason. But one of the things they don't have is that wing that can apply rim pressure. Like Garland and Mitchell will be able to do it. The bigs are able to do it. And you'd say, oh, okay, well, you got like 4 out of 5 of your starting lineup that's able to provide it. But then you run into situations like the Cavs did against Orlando, where, you're going up against Jalen Suggs, who completely played lockdown defense on Donovan Mitchell. He wasn't able to move around. Garland, keeps them in the game with his 36 points, but Jared Allen gets into foul trouble that game, and you're without Evan Mobley. So you had no bigs that could apply rim pressure, and you didn't have wings that can provide rim pressure, right? Because Max Strus, George Niang, all those guys, they're just going to be getting those shots up and spotting up. So the Cavs had just a ridiculous number of open to wide open looks. I believe 39 out of their 43s attempts in that game were wide open, but none of them were able to go down. And it got them into that kind of Celtics territory where, especially last season when the shots weren't falling, they could lose to anybody, right? Like they just became such a high variance team. But I just feel like when you have that ability to apply that rim pressure from multiple positions, it does make you a little more insulated to those kind of cold shooting nights. And you can start to do the things offensively that are going to manipulate the defense, get them to change to take that away, and hopefully in turn generate better looks from beyond the 3-point line.
Yeah, definitely. And the wings still in this matchup and with Cleveland, we'll get to them in a second. It's a big difference here. And as great as that Cavs roster is, top to bottom, when they're healthy, even with all the additions here, I still have some questions. And it showed
Yeah.
last night again. And yeah, it's some Brown and Tatum at the peak of the peak at that position. But the difference is pretty stark there just in terms of what they're both courting. Now, in terms of the coaching here, it's been great to see Joe bounce back the way he has here. And I had my criticisms of him last year. I still think there are many that you can throw at him and many questions you can have about his ability to get this done here. But I think so far through 17-5, it's been great. And I think the messaging's been much better this year from him. I think the management of a new look roster has been sensational. And they're defending again this year, as you mentioned earlier, at a level that I'm satisfied with here, because I thought that slipped a little bit last year, and he even
Mm.
admitted that going into this. They were bad on that end in the postseason, frankly. So in terms of just keeping everybody engaged, getting that sense of sacrifice, running an offense that's top 5-10 here, running a defense that's top 5-10, and having flexibility, right? Like going to post ups at the level they have. Didn't expect that from a coach who was so into the 3-point shot, but he did it.
Mhm.
Mixing and matching different guys off the bench, figuring out what the starting lineup's going to be. Like those are the things you look at from the coach. And listen, you want to talk about timeouts or meltdowns late in games or just play calling and like the flow and rhythm of the game. Like that's what people get pissed off at a lot with him. And it's like,
Not a single fan base feels good about it. Not a single fan base in the NBA feels like their coach does a good job of rotations, timeouts, when they call challenges. Oh my God, the blown 10-point leads. Like I hear that all the time. 10-point leads are nothing in today's NBA. Like absolutely nothing. 20 you can talk about, right? Okay, like we gave up a 20-point lead. What went wrong structurally and whatnot. But 10, like that's 3 possessions basically in today's NBA with a 3-point variance that's out there. Like I feel like Joe Mazzulla has done a good job. You get the occasional stories of like friction and stuff like that, but like I also feel that's a product of the Boston media market and the microscope that's on this team and the pressure and the understanding that hey, this is a team that made the finals. Like you're not going to know what it is until you get to the playoffs again and you see another playoff run, and like that's what they're ultimately going to be judged on. But I feel like people will put too much blame on coaching because they don't want to be honest about the players, and they don't
yes,
want to
that's
say, "Hey,"
exactly what it is in Boston. Yeah.
and especially because like so much of the debate shows and stuff like that, we've turned winning and losing into something genetic. Like, do you have the clutch gene? Are you a winner or are you a losing player? When in reality, like someone's got to win, someone's got to lose. Sometimes you have a bad game, sometimes you have a good game. Sometimes the shots fall, sometimes they don't. Right? Like it can be random, and it's usually more to do with your like to me, if you're a winner, you're someone that's resilient. You're someone that's not afraid to take those shots the next time it comes up. And you learn from those mistakes, right? Like I just think because people know that the coach is easier to replace than the players, it's an easy scapegoat. But at the same time, like often it does come down to the players, especially when you talk about like offensive sets and execution and stuff like that. Coaches aren't like it's not football where the plays coming in from the sideline every single possession. Rick Carlisle says he calls 2, maybe 3 plays a game for Indiana. It's all read and react. It's based off of what they drill in practice, understanding situations, understanding matchups, mismatches. What we do in the defense shows you this. So, from a preparation standpoint, I think the plays a heavy role. But then when it comes to the actual execution in games, I think it comes down to the players. And sometimes, like, you have your good games, you have your bad games, you have your games where you play 3 games in 4 nights in 3 different cities. Like, there's so many different situations that come up that, fans will, it's either context or excuses based on how angry they are.
Yeah, I don't think Joe's gonna swing massively whether they get it done this year or not. I think it is gonna come down to Porzingis' health, Brown and Tatum's consistency in the playoffs and ability to make other guys better, which still a work in progress here. But there's pressure on everybody, and that's what happens when you have a team as good as theirs that hasn't got it done for as many years as they haven't here, and had some really frustrating playoff losses. I mean, I still think back to 2 years ago when they went to the finals. They almost just completely melted down in Game 7 against the Heat that year too. So
Yeah. Oh,
they've
I'm
had
I'm I'm
issues.
still mad at you guys. You guys gave the Warriors a title. Golden State wasn't the better team, and obviously, Tatum was hurt and all the context, blah blah blah. But you gave the Warriors a title. I'm always going to resent you for that.
How are you enjoying this Warriors season?
I mean, my favorite part of it was back when it still meant something to beat the Warriors. The Cavs beating them twice. That those were 2, feel good wins in a week, and then after that, Curry got hurt, and Draymond got a suspension and whatnot. But yeah, when you're down a little bit and the season hasn't started the way that you hope, you're looking for pain elsewhere in those that you want to see experience pain.
Celtics did have their pick for a couple of weeks before they flipped it for Drew Holiday, and now the Blazers have it. So Portland's going to be excited about how that's going out there.
Yeah.
We're going to get to the Cavs now and see what's going on over there. But first, FanDuel, right now, head over there, bet $5 money line. You're going to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Right now, we got football going on, starting again tomorrow, hockey, basketball, of course. And it's every night you're going to have something to bet on here. If you're interested, go over there, check it out. Official sports wagering partner of CLNS Media, Garn Report, and all the rest here. 21 plus present in mass, of course, $5 moneyline wager required, and the bonus bets are non-withdrawable, expire in 7 days. So go check it out. Again, fanduel.com/Boston. Great app, great experience over there. Good friends, good partners of the network here. Let's get to the Cavs, a team I've liked, team I thought was in the finals mix last year, and that went
And
haywire in the
I
first round.
told you before that they are not. I told you to not discount experience. Do not, even though they had the metrics of a finals team, they were not going to be a finals team. I shoved that down your throat and you didn't want to listen to me.
No, and so
And I'm a
now
homer. I'm a homer ass homer, man. Come on. Like I'm a homer and I still understood that.
you got the experience into year 2, and most of this team's back. They're another year older, another year together. Good additions, I thought. And
Mhm.
Strus, who played decent last night, and Yang, who brings some shooting that they needed. And is Ty Jerome hurt, or is he not part of the mix here? Or
He's hurt. Yeah, he went down in the second game of the year. So, that was obviously unfortunate because they were already down Darius Garland and Ricky Rubio was away with, the mental health situation there. So, the Cavs have been playing a lot of games without a point guard this year, and
yeah,
no
and
backup point guard has really hurt as well. To add that to
yeah.
the equation.
So that's probably the story here, and I know you've talked a lot about that, the injuries, the
Yeah,
losses, um, and some young guys playing off the bench too, and of course, old friend Tristan Thompson, who's part of the rotation once again.
unbelievable. Never saw that. Like, I don't think he even saw that coming. But like I
It
thought
blew
Damian
my
Jones.
mind. In
Yeah,
2023, turning to 2024, to see him on the Garden baseline stretching it out yesterday, I was
and
like, "Oh my
playing
god."
well, man. Like, he's been playing
He
well. That's
looks
the
good. He
biggest
looks like he's
surprise,
in
yeah.
good shape. Yeah. He, of
Yeah,
course, had
like
his moment against Jokic last year, and I'm sure that kind of reinvigorated him.
yeah, he looks good back in wine and gold. I wish he had 13 back. I hope to see that in the Raptors one day. But yeah, it's nice to have Tristan back. I think the expectation was that Damian Jones was going to be that backup big, but he just didn't play as well, and Tristan kind of took that opportunity from him. Yeah, obviously injuries have been one of the major stories. Like even when guys are playing, they've been playing through injuries. Like Darius Garland hadn't even really been taking threes, dealing with a hand issue. He had that wrapped up for a while. Hamstring issues for Garland, Mitchell, Levert. It's been unfortunate. Like they played 24 games this year, Bobby. How many games would you guess their second most used lineup from a minutes perspective has played together this year?
So, like 10,
3.
3.
3. 3
Yeah.
games. They have one lineup that's played over 42 minutes this year, and that's of course their starters. Wait,
Would you say would you say this is the second most injured team in the league behind Memphis?
I mean, it's gotta be up there, at least when you're looking at kinda key injuries and stuff like that. Like, it's been tough, and, it's disappointing too because you looked at the preseason and the Cavs, their points of emphasis coming into this year was, "We're gonna speed up the pace, we're going to take more threes, and we feel good about our depth." You have Ty Jerome, 6'5" point guard, never turns the ball over, shoots well, played terrific for them in preseason, and you're like, "All right, this is great." You have a 6'5" backup point guard that you can stagger with Garland and Mitchell. That makes sense in either pairing, either configuration there. And basically, you're saying the only guys that aren't 6'5" or taller are Garland and Mitchell. Like that makes a lot of sense from a team build standpoint. But then, you got Mitchell dealing with the hamstring injury and out for a while. You got Garland with the hamstring and then the shooting hand injury that took him down. Like, not a single player in their rotation is shooting up to their career average from three. Like Max Strus is the closest. I'm cheating a little bit. He's just 0.3% below his career average. And honestly, like he should be in the mix for most improved player because he's just been phenomenal for the Cavs. And like taking on like Iguodala type roles where he's running pick and roll really well. His assists are up, his rebounds up. He's doing it all.
He's so tough too. He fits in with this group.
Yeah, it's just been really, really disappointing because, it's a bunch of false starts and it's made it very hard to evaluate this season. And it's ill time too. Like the Cavs, I'm sure after Thursday, they're going into it with the fifth hardest schedule to this point of the year. Playing Boston again is going to bump that up. It's a lot easier immediately after Thursday against Boston. So you hope that some relief is coming, but yeah, it's just been disappointing. Like even early storylines or early season storylines, like when Garland and obviously Allen missed the start of the year too. When both of them were out, it was, oh, Isaac Okoro seems to have made a leap. Like he's hitting the boards, he's doing
Tatum
great.
went at him.
He
Tatum was going at him last night.
well, let me finish. So it looked like he made a leap. He's hitting the glass. He's hitting threes. He's way more confident. They're letting him run offense. And then that knee injury that held him out a month before the playoffs and was bothering him in the playoffs came back up. And then Okoro misses 3-4 weeks. And he's just working his way back from injury now, right? Like that's disappointing. Karis LeVert to start the year looked like he was on a path to win six man of the year. Then he goes down with a knee injury and just had his first game back yesterday against Boston, right? Like it's every single good story seems to be, kind of sidetracked or derailed by the injuries, and that's really disappointing. But to me, the most positive indicator is it looks like Garland and Mitchell are starting to find their groove again, that they're starting to get healthy, they're playing well off of one another. And when those two are playing well, the Cavs are just so damn hard to beat. And I feel like they're going to be in a better position moving forward, assuming that Evan Mobley does come back in the relatively near future.
Yeah, and I'm always gonna look at the wing spot. Like, Garland and Mitchell are gonna do their thing. You know Mobley and Allen to some degree, and I do think, they need to take it up another level this year, especially in the playoffs. You generally know what you're gonna get from them defensively,
Yep.
which is kind of the rock of this team. but still at the wing. Like Strus, I like the addition. I like all the things you say there, but when you go up against the Tatum and Brown, there's just a different level at that spot, and they were able to take advantage of him. Okoro comes in, really struggled to keep up with those guys too. Levert, like I like the scoring there, but we're not really like that wing physically.
Yeah,
And then
I mean, he plays
Niang's
decent
just
enough
kind of a
defense.
spot up shooter. So like again, I think they did what they could with the resources they had, and I thought they were all great additions. But you're still looking at an offense here that's stuck in the bottom 10
Mhm.
and
Hey,
not
last night was the best offensive performance an opponent of the Celtics has had all year. 116.5 offensive rating. That was the best that they've
no
had.
way, really? All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, that was the best offensive performance. So that was great to see. Like obviously Strus is a little undersized at the small forward position, but like Miami made a finals run with starting 2 6'5" wings in Strus and Caleb Martin, and Strus was being asked to guard centers, power forwards, like he was being moved up and down the lineup, and I just feel like the structural of an integrity of playing him next to Mobley and Allen, like part of the reason the Cavs and Celtics have had such great games going back to last year is Evan Mobley is able to go out and guard wings, right? Like he's able to throw his length at Jayson Tatum, and they're able to really, gum things up. And when you look at the dunks and threes adjusted to the schedule net ratings and whatnot, they have the Cavs eighth, third defensively, 19th offensively, and like I kind of just assume that the offense is going to pick up because when you look at last year, I think there's a narrative that the big man pairing, like they weren't able to generate good offense with Mobley and Allen on the court. They had offensive rating of over 120 with both of those guys on the court last season, right? And the starting lineup with Isaac Okoro at the three as the third best shooter in that lineup had a 122 offensive rating. So you would think swapping in Max Strus for Isaac Okoro would elevate the offense. And the only reason it hasn't is because Mitchell and Garland haven't been themselves to start the year. And now that they're starting to, I think there's enough indicators there. You can look at the track record and the larger sample size beyond, a 3 game sample size that's the second largest that the Cavs lineups have this season. You can look at that and say, okay, they're going to take a step in the right direction. And I don't think that this is a team that can be on the same tier as Boston or Milwaukee. But I think right after that, I think they can get back to that level here with good health.
Yeah, you're convincing me, and I don't really need to be convinced with them because I do like them as a team here. But the one other thing that has to be a factor here, I think, and I don't know how much it's been a discussion around them, but it is something everyone's keeping their eye on is the Mitchell thing.
Yep.
Like that has to hover over this team to some degree. The fact that, oh no, we're hurt this year, we'll get it next year, or we're still building momentum here, or we're still trying to mesh with some new players. There's this pressure on them to go deep in the playoffs and maybe even win it this year or, be on that level because Mitchell has that out effectively with 1 year left after this one. And there's so much chatter around him, so many reports and rumors that has to impact the team. Like we've seen trade rumors with younger players on a roster impact teams like the Lakers and Celtics like years ago with Davis and stuff like that. I just think matters. Like, is he going to be here next year?
Mhm.
And as Brian Windhorst has talked about and a bunch of different guys, that just doesn't seem certain. And there's all this noise in New York too. I think Josh Hart even talked about in an interview over the summer acknowledging that they'd love to have him and, maybe that will happen. So that's tough for this team to manage this year.
Without a doubt, and it's a two-way street too, right? Like you're from a Cavs perspective, you're saying, okay, are we going to commit to this small backcourt? Or because obviously, Darius Garland is part of the team moving forward, and like when you look at from an impact perspective, like an on-off net rating perspective, like Garland is still the guy that elevates this team more than anybody else. But Mitchell's, the leading scorer. He's a phenomenal player. He's been a great fit, and it's a it's a stressor, right? Like when you don't get a proper sample size to evaluate this, like you're like, man, like we're really going to be operating off of limited information. And like you're going to have to make an assessment of one, is Mitchell going to extend the summer? If the answer is no, you're probably going to have to look at options because he's going to have a player option after next season. And you're also looking at it from a perspective of, okay, are we as far ahead as a team as we thought we are? If the answer is no, and the timeline doesn't line up with Donovan Mitchell, then maybe you have to like look at recouping assets. Maybe you have to look at a deal to kind of reset that timeline. If you're able to, let's say, get a couple wings, shuffle Strus over to the 2, you get a few picks, and all of a sudden you just kind of reset that timeline. Like that might be something that they have to look at, whether it is an interested team like the Knicks or the Nets or I'm sure you'd probably have like Lakers, Rockets, and all those other teams. I'm not a reporter. Do not aggregate me. I do not do sources. I'm just guessing what teams might be interested. God, who knows? Maybe even Boston. But
He
like
does love those guys, but I don't think so.
I know. Like all of that's like it's going to have to come into consideration, right? So it definitely does put pressure. I think the goal coming into this year was to win a round, not win the playoffs, but to win a round. And the thing that was most important to me was that I think they have to look competitive. I think they can't be outclassed in a playoff series. Like if you win a first round series, and let's say you're going up against Boston, and you give them a hard fought 6-7 games, that to me matters because then you can say, okay, we're still internal growth away. We're going to have our mid-level exception. You got a first round pick in the draft this year that you can move on draft night. So there's options that way. But if they go to the playoffs and it looks like last year against the Knicks, where frankly they beat themselves and got outclassed, that's going to be concerning, and that's going to cause them to look hard in the mirror.
It's a good point. If you're not there anyway, what harm is it to trade him and reset a little bit? The only problem is you gave up how many picks for him?
3.
3, which isn't
Yeah.
terrible, I guess, if you're getting some back there.
Yeah.
The Knicks, they make a lot of sense as a trade partner. Obviously, they want him. They can give up a lot. That'd be interesting to me if things don't go well for Cleveland this year. And you
I
do
should have
wonder,
listed Miami because, of course, Miami's always going to be in the hunt too.
and they don't have as much to offer as
Yeah,
we saw this summer. So I don't know. It's gonna be interesting.
yeah,
You wish they could have had a little bit more time here with this group to generate some momentum, and hopefully they will later in this season once they do get healthy, because it's an intriguing group with the guards and the wing and the big men that they have here, and how
yeah.
great they looked at points last year. But that clock's ticking already, which is kind of where the league is now. And
It's unfortunate, but it is reality, right? Like, and for that reason, I think the Cavs core more than anyone, it's Garland and Mobley, and then to a lesser extent Mitchell and Allen, and that just has to do with contract status for Mitchell. But the one thing I'll say about Donovan Mitchell is the buy-in's really been there. Like in terms of what he's doing on the court, in terms
he
of
looked
his
pretty locked in last night.
what he's doing in the community. He played a major role in recruiting Max Strus and George Niang to sign long-term contracts in Cleveland in terms of free agency. Like, I talked to the Knicks guys on the podcast earlier this offseason, and Strus was their big target. Like, if Strus goes to the Knicks instead of the Cavs, that hurts. Like, so Mitchell being out there and recruiting against the Knicks and getting Strus into Cleveland, I think was a big win. So from that perspective, I have a lot of respect for Donovan Mitchell, and that's as a fan, that's all you really ask for. Because if he's giving his all for these 2 years, and after these years, you look at it and either the Cavs say, "Hey, we're not as close as we think we are," or Mitchell says, "Hey, I don't think you guys are as close as I thought you were, and we're going to have to, break up as a result of that." Like that's something where it's going to make sense for both sides. You can say, "Hey, you gave it your honest shot. We gave it our honest shot. We made our win now moves to try to help out. We're still going to have a long runway in terms of being competitive, and maybe with the reset, we can take another swing at some point." Because this was a 45 win team before Mitchell came, and that was in a season where they had the most injuries in the league again, which unfortunately was a part of that storyline too. But um, it's a better roster now, like even without Donovan than they had at that time. So I think they're heading in the right direction, and I just hope that we get enough of a sample size of this group healthy and together to properly assess where this is at.
I do have one more question before we get you out of here, but you made me think last year's Cavs. There's a guy missing here who's been missing on the Boston side too, and everyone's asking, why won't the
Junkyard Dog.
Celtics play Lamar Stevens?
Oh, I love
Everyone's
Lamar.
honestly been asking that this year. He hasn't gotten a second of real rotation time. The bench has been solid. Like they have Hauser, Cornette, and Pritchard, so they don't really need a ton beyond that night tonight. But man, this point in the season, they've tried pretty much everybody else, and guy who just keeps sitting there on the bench, Lamar Stevens, who was a starter for this Cavs team for 25 games last year.
Yeah, that was the only combination. That was the only fifth man in that starting five that caused a negative net rating. Every other combo worked. I loved Lamar though. Like he gave such great effort when he was in Cleveland. It's a little tough as an undersized four, basically at 6'5", but he gives good fight. He's someone that you can throw at kind of larger body guys that like to get to the rim. He gave good minutes against Giannis in some of those matchups. So, I'm always rooting for him. Cavs actually are having a little bit of a nice run when it comes to undrafted players. Dean Wade, Lamar Stevens, Craig Porter Jr. now. And then I guess not undrafted, but late pick that I could not be more excited about is Amani Bates, who's just absolutely lighting the world on fire in the G
You think
League.
his moment will come at some point this
Oh,
year?
I don't know about this year. Maybe after the trade deadline, what I could see is maybe at the trade deadline, there's like a smaller consolidation move where you're like maybe it's a stretch four for when you're staggering the bigs or something like that, and all of a sudden you need a little bit more wing depth, so you go to someone like Amani Bates. Like I think that's where I could see it, but I I've just been so impressed with his just his level of buy-in. He's been in the gym constantly with them, working on his body. He's looking more explosive, leading the G League in scoring, shooting 45% from three on 10, 11 attempts
He
per
was
game.
awesome in the summer league.
Dude, like and he's just looked so like it's such a seamless fit. And when you look from a cast perspective, like being able to throw a 6'10" wing, yeah, he's got defensive limitations, but can shoot the hell out of the ball. Like that makes sense next to Mobley and Allen. I think it would likely be coming off the bench whenever that does come, but having that as an option is a lot of fun. And for the Cavs to, having given up draft capital, for them to find a guy at pick 49 in Amani Bates that has that kind of potential, and Craig Porter Jr., who looks like he's going to be a rotation player in the future. That's a big win, and I think it speaks to their scouting and player development.
All right, real quick here, want to give a shout out to HelloFresh, still giving free breakfast item for life when you sign up over there. However many boxes you order, they're always going to throw in free breakfast over there when you go to HelloFresh.com/CLNS free. Love their service. Use it all the time. Lay down instructions, breakfast items, lunch, dinner. Dinner's in under 15 minutes with their quick and easy recipes. And again, if you don't love cooking, they got the instructions. It's all pre-packaged and pre-portioned and makes it fun. It really is a good time cooking with HelloFresh, one of my favorite sponsors we've had here. Check it out, to your door, customizable for your diet or when you need it. It's all available and more over at HelloFresh.com/CLNS free, and they're going to throw in free breakfast as well. And SeatGeek, tickets, concerts, games, whatever you need right now. It can be tough to get those tickets, but SeatGeek's great. They give you the green for a great deal, red for a deal you probably don't want, and they're giving you $20 as well off your first order when you use the code Dreamers Pro. That's SeatGeek, $20 off your first purchase when you use the promo code Dreamers Pro. Download it. Used it for a long time. Always enjoyed the experience over there. And go get that promo code if you first time user there. We're gonna get out of here and go over to the Chase Down podcast, Justin's podcast with Carter Rodriguez, the official Cavaliers podcast. Before we let you go, though, Justin, real quick on Mobley, who we didn't get to see in the series, who we won't see tomorrow, who obviously a lot of people have a ton of promise for. Are you seeing the steps this year? Is there progression? Is there growth now into what's this, his fourth season? Third?
Third, yeah. So he's 22 years old. I think I think he's taken another step up defensively. I think he should be a front runner for Defensive Player of the Year. I'd probably vote Rudy if I had the vote, but I think Mobley's right there. He's just absolutely elite on that end. I've liked that we're seeing more self creation out of him. Attacking the basket, using his drive, the handles a little bit tighter. Coming into this year, like people always act like there's something magical about year three. But really, like, he's 22 years old. I didn't expect like the leap coming from him this season. But what I wanted to see was a more consistent version of who we saw to close out last year. The last 40 games last year, he was averaging 18 and 10, 3 assists per game. Obviously, the steals and blocks are there. And for me, I think the best version of Evan Mobley resembles Bam Adebayo, like a 7-1 Bam Adebayo rather than a 6-9 version, which obviously the biggest factor is going to come on whether or not he develops that mid-range game, if he's able to be that playmaking hub, because especially if you're going to build around two short guards, you're going to need to have that front court creator, and Mobley needs to be that guy. He was not that guy in the playoffs, and honestly, I think that was the biggest point of failure in the Cavs offense overall. Understandable with how young he is and the stage that they were on. But that's, to me, that's the biggest X factor when it comes to the Cavs, because I think he needs to be the most impactful player on the team, but I still think at his best he's probably going to be the second or third leading scorer, if that makes sense.
We have some breaking news as well. Draymond Green suspended indefinitely.
Ooh! Oh my goodness. Not great for my fantasy team. Which is what all the listeners are here for.
That wasn't the reaction I was expecting. Wow. I don't know what that means. All I know is, which we knew to begin with, bad for Golden State. They're in a bad place. Celtics play them Tuesday, so that's going to begin their West Coast trip. First, though, Cavs on Thursday, once again, second of 3 meetings between these teams this year. And then a Magic mini-series Friday and Sunday against the team the Cavs just saw as well. A tough team for both these teams when they've gone against them this year. Maybe one of the best teams in the East. Could they be, Justin?
Yeah, I'd say so.
All right, like I said, we're heading over to the Chase Down Podcast, Cleveland Cavaliers YouTube page. Go join us over there for some more conversation on both these teams here before they tip off again tomorrow. Thanks, Justin, as always.
No problem, Bobby. Looking forward to continue talking to you. And